Alright, okay, we made it as far as the fix. Now, I don't think there's any important physical effect with fix. In fact, you don't even have to have the temperature too precise from what I've read and what I've experienced. Here's a shocker. I keep my fixer up there right behind all my undeveloped films in their tanks, in their metal tanks. The fixer is sitting in plastic tanks, but it's in that cold window. And I can tell when I put it in the tank that it's making the tank kind of cold. It's probably not the best idea. I'm kind of talking myself out of that practice. And I try and warm the tank up with warm water, usually when I sense that that's the case. You'll know why I'm really concerned that I'm doing that. But anyway, I just want to say the temperature doesn't have to be too precise. Just careful not to shock by too cold, and I'm worried I might be too cold. Shock the emulsion into reticulation. I'll talk about reticulation a little later. Well, let me just say, you're going from one temperature to a much colder temperature, and you've got the film kind of in a delicate state. The reticulation is when a colder temperature makes the emulsion kind of crinkle up. I think this is what happens. It kind of crinkles up on the base, and it stays that way. So when you scan, let's say you scan, that's where you're going to do your images, you'll see these squiggly lines. It can actually look pretty cool. The first time I saw it, I thought, whoa, what is that? But I don't know if anybody would do that for effect, and I don't even know if you can force it at will. It's usually going to happen when you least expect it, and maybe you least want it. So the caution is keeping the temperatures, even if temperature's not that crucial, like with fixers, keeping the temperatures within an acceptable range so that you're not shocking the film, the emulsion, with a change in temperature. That goes later when you're doing your wash. I always feel like, gosh, wouldn't warmer water be great in the wash? And it probably would for one aspect, but if you can't warm up your photo flow that you're going to put in at the end to roughly that range of temperatures, even if your photo flow is at 68 or 72 or whatever, if that was 110, your wash, you're going to shock that difference. This is ice cold to this, even though they're not really. Relatively, it's too distant a temperature change. So be careful to keep, your temperatures in a range. Let's just say from 100 to 65. Boy, now I'll put a note in here. I'm going to go down after this and measure the temperature of that fixer bottle and see what I've been getting away with. I think it's probably pretty cold. All right, enough preaching about temperature. So once you get the fixer in, almost all films are 4 minutes, but tabular films like Delta, I include Delta, but T-Max makes a big deal out of it. So I include Delta too. They're both tabular films. 5 minutes. In the fixer I use, TF5 from Photographer's Formulary. Just once I started using that fixer, I used TF4 before I discovered TF5 or before it was available. But now I use TF5, and I don't want to use any other fixer. I'm just really, really happy with it. But anyway, just this note, you do need to fix longer for the tabular grain films, especially T-Max, all right? Now, I use fixer as a 3-shot. So in other words, what I do is for any given session, if I need new fixer, if it's not sitting in one of my reserve tanks, I'll dilute it, put it in my developing tank, use that, and I agitate every 30 seconds. You get an agitation, just like when the developer is there. And after the first use, it goes into one tank in the window, all right? Fresh stuff is probably at 68 degrees. I'll probably be careful with the temperature. Then I have the option, once I got enough in there, of just taking some out of that tank instead of mixing fresh, all right? When I'm done using a load of the one use, it's already been used once, it gets dumped into the next tank. So I have 2 reserve tanks. One has been used once, and one has been used twice. When I get enough in that second tank, I can start using it. But when I've finished a roll of film, or whatever's in a tank, right, 1 or 2 or 3 or however many rolls, that gets disposed of. Now, there are other ways of doing this. When I reviewed my process once with a friend who works at National Camera here in the Twin Cities, she said, oh no, I use Fixer as a one-shot. She says, it's your negatives. It's your only chance to get those images. You don't know what you got, and you'll never know if you don't do it right the first time. And I did that on her recommendation. I did that for a while. And then I just kind of got annoyed with mixing up Fixer all the time. So I introduced my reserve tank. And that was going so great. I said, you know what? I'm going to introduce a second reserve tank and use 3-shot. That has gone just fine. Okay? And there are ways to test whether your Fixer is getting exhausted. Okay? But I prefer not to do any extra testing. My 2-tank, 3-use is working good for me. If I don't have to introduce testing, I don't think I will. If somebody's got a better way, I'm really interested in hearing about it. But I bring you all this to see what my experience on reusing Fixer has been. And I'm missing one part of my experience. So going way back, at some point, I must not have been in the darkroom for a while, because I had Fixer mixed up, and I just was reusing it and reusing it. And reusing it, and reusing it, and reusing it, and reusing it, and reusing it. Like, I don't know how I lost track of that. You can't just reuse Fixer basically indefinitely. And at the point I was working, I was doing some work with 4x5, Tri-X 4x5, and I got pink results, just nothing but pink. And I went online and put in a forum, what my issue was, and they first thought that I was reusing my developer, that I diluted some developer and was just reusing it. But no, I'd exhausted that Fixer. There was nothing left. I wasn't going to do anything more. So I've been really much more cautious since then. That's what got me to gun shy when the gal at National Camera suggested, 1-shot. I was like, So may not be the absolute best advice, but there's a lot of my experience that I had with Fixer.